All right. Okay. Hey y'all. I'm so sorry for laughing so much, but hey y'all, it's Chemistry with Blessed the Highly Favored here. And today, welcome back to the Shy with Bold Faith podcast. And today we're back. We're gonna be talking about love and relationships from a biblical lens. And the name of this episode is called The Essence of Love. It's the same backstory essentially as the last backstory in episode 6, where I pretty much have prayed about like what specific topics to talk about, and we're given at least like I was given a few. But aside from that, let's get it shapoppin, shall we? So I'm gonna kind of break down the I'm gonna break it down like either way. But the backstory, long story short, like I said, it's the same as the last one, but with this one, similarly to the last one, I was given 4 couples, and those couples were Rebecca and Isaac, Esther or Hadassah and Xerxes, Hosea and Gomer, and Ruth and Boaz. And something I heard was that these relationships are not to be mimicked, but to be learned from, as they are not perfect nor ideal either. So we gonna paraphrase. We're gonna paraphrase, Rebecca and Isaac based on some of the notes I took, and then I'm gonna give like a summary. So I'm paraphrasing, like summing up their story, and then summing up what I realized about it. So, so So Rebecca and Isaac, they had going on was like more of an arranged marriage. So Rebecca was chosen to be married to Isaac as her and her family were adorned with gifts. And when Isaac first saw her, because I know some people gonna be like, Rebecca was 3 years old. She was not three, Bookie. I spent hours looking this up. She was not three. Like she was at least like a young adult. Like a young adult. Like at least around like the what 18 to 20-year-old mark when she first married Isaac, because Isaac was 40. That's a crazy gap, but hey, I'm just saying. So however, within their marriage, there was a lack of communication. So a while back, it took it took Isaac and Rebecca almost 20 years to be able to have a kid. So she kept praying and praying and praying, and then she was able to have, she was able to um, conceive children. So in Genesis 25:23, God speaks to Rebecca and says that, they're gonna duke it out for a while, and that the older will serve the younger. And instead of praying to God, she took matters into her own hands and scammed Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing instead of Esau. Like Jacob was eventually gonna get the blessing. Just in my opinion, the way it happened was crazy. And it already kind of didn't make it any better that like both Isaac and Rebecca was telling Jacob and Esau like, okay, if y'all marry anybody, don't marry them from a specific area. Only marry women from the specific area that we're telling you to marry said women at, right? And Esau does the complete opposite. Because I believe Esau marries a Hittite woman, I believe. Hold on. Let me look it up and make sure. Because that's what I remembered reading. Okay, yeah, I had to make sure. So Esau, so Esau married, jeez. So he married 2 women from both the Canaanites and the Hittites, essentially. And Esau doing this made Isaac and Rebecca upset with him to the point of where Rebecca was acting like she was finna die, passing out everything, pooping, crying, throwing up. She was like, why didn't you listen? Why didn't you listen? So, pertaining to the whole thing with, Rebecca and Jacob deceiving Isaac, Um, Esau walks in and is like that's not that was not me. That was Jacob. Like, where's my blessing? Where is my blessing? And it got to a point of where Esau already sold off his birthright for a bowl of soup, essentially. Dude is so mad that his blessing was given to Jacob that he was like, I'm finna kill him. And Isaac was like, yeah, this finna get tense. Jacob, go live with your uncle Laban and stay there. Stay there for a while. And that's eventually where Jacob ended up meeting his wife, Rachel, and his other wife, Leah. So the thing about it though is that the decision that Rebecca made was echoed in Jacob, Leah, and Rachel's family dynamics, as Jacob was deceived into marrying Leah instead of Rachel, and he treated Leah poorly, mind you. Just like with Rebecca and Isaac, Jacob also played favorites just as Isaac did. Jacob still technically continued to lie to his brother when they reconnected years later, as Esau forgave him. But in the back of Jacob's mind, he still thinks that Esau is probably plotting to kill him. And also, it was similar to where Joseph was sold off and his brothers faked his death, similarly to how Jacob and Rachel essentially deceived Isaac into thinking that Jacob was Esau, using the goat skin that was like super furry or whatever. So the thing that I find interesting, that I picked up on when I was like reading a lot about it was that Isaac and Rebecca had a great amount of, just of the lack of communication, to where Rebecca deceived her husband. Rebecca deceived Isaac, and the constant amounts of deception, within their home pertaining to like that alone really shaped Jacob's habits of deception and playing favorites, as well. And he paid for that through Laban and Joseph, as Laban tricked him almost the same way. And how Joseph, how sadly Joseph, like I just said, Joseph sadly was sold off, and all 11 of his sons had deceived him into thinking that Joseph was killed, when in reality he was alive and sold off to a foreign land. Long story short. So Isaac and Rebecca's dynamic was a little similar to Ahab and Jezebel's, as Isaac, just like Ahab, was passive, and Rebecca was a little more like domineering, in a sense, like similar to Jezebel, but the only difference was like Jezebel, she was out of pocket. She was fully out of pocket. Period. So we gonna go to Hadassah and Xerxes. I like to use her actual name because I don't know, I feel like a lot of people focus heavily on Hadassah's Persian name compared to like her actual name for real. So once again, we're gonna sum it up. So Hadassah, or Esther, was chosen to be King Xerxes' wife, as she was given, she was given beauty treatments, good eats, and attendants and servants, for about like 12 years. They had to do a beauty treatment and stuff, and bathe in herbs and stuff or whatever for like, not 12 years, for 12 months, a whole year, right? Before she was even chosen. So he specifically chose her and was attracted to her more than the other women, as, he threw a banquet and so on once they got married. However, that man was mean. He was mean. People love to sit and act like Xerxes was just so nice. He was mean. He was so mean. Like, they struggled with communication in the very beginning of their like marriage, and only had a conversation with her or talked to her when she was instructed, to come. Outside of that, if he didn't say, hey, come here real quick, she was not getting spoke to or nothing. However, when Xerxes promoted Haman to a higher position, there started to be even bigger cracks in their marriage to where Xerxes listened to outside sources. Like Haman was one of those examples, as well as it was a guy named Mecumen, I believe. These biblical names be beating me up. Oh my goodness. So two of these dudes over his own wife, and God used Esther to expose Haman. Y'all gonna laugh at me. So the name is Memucan. Where did I get Mekumen? Anyways, but that was the man. So verbatim, like how this whole thing started was that pretty much Xerxes and all his men get drunk and was like, bring Vashti out. Bring her out in nothing but a crown. And Vashti was like, no, I'm not finna do that. I'm not finna do that. No. And Memucan essentially, along with like other people, were like, you need to divorce her because if you don't get her in line, the other girlies are gonna get out of line and you don't want that. So they end up getting a divorce. Like, it was just crazy. So the thing I noticed within their whole situation is that King Xerxes did not respect his first wife as he lived and ruled among a fallen land. When, like, a prime example, when Noah was naked and was drunk, he was at his most vulnerable, and the only person that was there to help him was Ham, and he didn't even care to cover Noah's shame. He didn't even care. He was making fun of him, and his other sons had to step in and help. So, and just like the same way that Ham didn't care like that, Xerxes was drunk. Xerxes and his men were drunk and didn't think nor care about the reality that something bad could have happened to Vashti. And I'm not going to give no examples, but just know when it comes to some people, it's not really a good idea to drink alcohol because you do have some people that do not handle their liquor very well and they start getting belligerent and they start acting crazy. So, rightfully so, Vashti left. But it opened the door for Xerxes to change in Hadassah or Esther to save the Jews from the clutches of extinction. Like point blank period. Because at the end of the day, back in those times, modesty was everything. That's crazy to sit and to want the queen to be modest, but get drunk and want her to act in a immodest way. I don't know. That's just crazy to me. But next, we got Jose and Gomer. So Jose was made to marry an unfaithful woman who, I mean, was cheating on him every chance she got, and and stay with, have kids with her, and even buy her back from other men to show Israel exactly how they were treating God via repeatedly not being loyal to him. And they eventually were punished for their wrongdoings and later restored. So, something I noticed within Jose and Gomer's relationship, and you can find this in the book of Hosea, essentially. So I had jotted down that the sins or actions you do in a relationship are not private but also public. It affects the other person. So have consideration and loyalty for your partner. And then also at the same time, God has the ability to restore any situation that he assigns you to be in relationship wise. But don't trick yourself into being in a hurtful situation that you're not supposed to be in to begin with. As sometimes the people we think we're supposed to be with are actually sent by Satan to harm and cause us further delay. Last but not least, we're going to go with Ruth and Boaz. So, Ruth, geez. So, Ruth, along with her mother in law, Naomi, they lost their husbands. So, despite despite this loss, Naomi pretty much. Okay, yeah, so around my bed, I had got distracted. I had to step away for a little bit. But yeah, but long story short, around this time, um, Naomi has two daughter-in-laws, and everybody's not everybody, but Naomi and these two women, they're all their husbands die. And Naomi is like, okay, y'all can go back home. Since, sadly this has happened, you don't have to stay with me. You can always just return back to back to your parents' place. And one lady was like, all right, bet, say less. I'm on my way home. But then the other lady, who is Ruth, is like, no, I'm finna stay with you. Cause at the end of the day, wherever you go, I'ma go. Your God is gonna be my God. Like we locked in, ain't no switching up. So they're traveling together and so on. And then Ruth ends up it's just crazy. It's just crazy because Ruth is staying with Naomi, traveling with her, taking care of her, helping her, and so on. So they make it, to this village, to this land. And Ruth goes and starts gleaning the land, or pretty much like getting some food for her and Naomi. And she ends up, somebody she catches somebody eye. She end up catching, you know, the attention of Boaz essentially, without even realizing it. She just picking the food. And Boaz apparently liked what he saw. So it's to a point of where, geez, because Boaz knew of Ruth because he is actually, I believe he was the relative of Naomi's husband who passed away. So, that happens. They're kind of acquaintanced already and so on. And they eventually grow a little closer. And Ruth pretty much gives, a marriage proposal to Boaz. And he's like, okay, like I accept, but at the same time, there at least let me make sure that there is not a person or like a kinsman redeemer that is like closer to me. Well, not closer to me, but like closer to be able to marry Ruth compared to me. Because even though he's a kinsman redeemer, he just had to make sure in a way that is respectful to both Ruth and also respectful to the Mosaic law, as he is an Israelite, right? Because at the time, a kinsman redeemer, their whole situation by technicality is more of like a leave rate marriage. Because, like, back in the day, if somebody, let's just say two people are married, like a man and a woman are married, and if the man dies, I believe the brother or male relative that's left in that person's family, or whatever the case may be, has to be the one to step in and marry said person, right? So, ooh, goodness gracious. So they grow close, things of that nature, and they eventually get married. So what I had noticed in their relationship was, throughout their relationship, Boaz looked out for both Naomi and Ruth, as he was a kinsman redeemer, right? So it's pretty much a male relative who helps a weaker relative in need or is in danger, or essentially the person, that person that eventually marries a woman in a leave rate marriage, right? So, however, Boaz was attracted to Ruth and respected her as he was an Israelite. They came from two different nations. Regardless of that, Boaz, cared about Ruth a lot. So the customs in ancient times, you know, was that you were to marry a woman instead of having, instead of doing the do outside of marriage, such as courting, as well as that leave rate marriage I was talking about in Ruth's case. So through Boaz redeeming Ruth, or marrying Ruth, in return, she ended up birthing the lineage of David. So in relationships, the man, you know, from a male, you know, role or so on, the man should always step in and care for you while, also caring about where you lay your head, your state of being, etc. If he does not, he doesn't care about you. Just in general. And I know some people are gonna hear this and be like, oh, she's being a feminist. She's doing this. She's doing that. And it's like it's the bare minimum. Like when you're in a relationship, you should never be in a relationship with someone that doesn't care about you. Whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. You should always be with someone that at least has the common decency and bare minimum of at least caring about, your state of being. Just period. Right? So, y'all may or may not hate me for this part right here. So, I had heard, like, in this, situation. So, I pretty much heard to jot down, unbiblical things, in relationships or so on. So, I heard to jot down 6 different things. Really, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, 8 things, but I summed it up to 6. So, I had heard to jot these 6 things down and I'm gonna break it down verbatim. So the first thing I'm gonna talk about that's unbiblical is 50-50. So, geez, I'm gonna say my thoughts on that, and then I'm gonna say, what it is from a biblical standpoint. So I'm gonna always say, pertaining to 50-50, I feel like it is birthed from a tit for tat mentality, and that to G's to try to look at things and to try to function as a 50-50 type partnership is literally similar to how roommates are, and it's very similar to how people move, in the midst of like divorce agreements and so on. And all relationships are 100% on both sides. Like even if one person is sick and don't feel well, they're still giving it their all at the end of the day, because when it comes down to it, it takes two, to be in a healthy relationship. Like, it's very strange to go in a relationship and, consistently looking on the other side and being like, make sure you do your part, make sure you do your part, make sure you do your part. And it's like, that's the bare minimum. When you're in a relationship, it shouldn't even be seen that way. What it really should be seen as is, okay, I'm here, you're here, let's work together as a team and get this stuff done. Period. Like, we can talk about it or whatever the case may be. You can handle this, you can handle this, or if you don't want to handle this, I can step in and handle that for you, or whatever the case may be. Like, relationships, like, all relationships are like 100% in general. It's not a 50, it's not split down the middle. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it reminds me, geez, and here's where the biblical aspect comes in. So it reminds me of when I first thought of 50-50, it randomly reminded me of the whole situation where there were these two women, these two sex workers, and they were living together, and both of them had a baby, but sadly one of the women had fell asleep on top of the baby and sadly, killed the baby. So both of the women were like, this is my baby, this is my baby, tell her to give me my baby. And one of the women, and Solomon is just sitting here just like listening to their situation, and it's to a point of where one of the women was like, this is my baby or whatever. And then Solomon was like, okay, if since it's both y'all's babies, let's cut the baby in half. And it got to a point of where the real mom of the child was like, no, Just let her have, just let her have the baby. And then within that situation, Solomon realized, who the real mom is. Because if that was really her child, why would you want your child to be cut in half? That doesn't make any sense. And the same way, with 50-50, is it kind of causes a lot of unnecessary conflicts, to the point of where people are arguing about, this is mine, 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 when in reality, when it comes to a relationship, there should always be that amount of love where it's like, you know what, it's not about this is mine and that is mine, it's really ours all together. Like, from a relationship standpoint, like from their standpoint, you know, we knew we knew who the mother of the child was. But the thing about it was that the mother was so selfless that in the presence of Solomon, she was like, you know what? I don't want anything bad to happen to my baby. So I'm just going to sit here and let this woman lie in order to protect and save my baby from being killed. Like, when you love something or someone, you know, you don't want anything bad to happen to it. Even if it means, you know, even if it means compromising, you know, I wouldn't even say compromising. It's like, even if it means, sacrificing, for the greater good, like in their situation, like is what I mean this in. Because deep down, she didn't want to sit and lie and say that, that wasn't, she didn't want to sit and lie and say, you know what? No, it's her baby. Just let her have it. Do, do, do. Because she wasn't even caring about, that. She was caring about, okay, as long as my baby is safe, that's all I care about, because I love them and I want them to live, right? And it's the same, it should be the same way in a relationship, where it's like, okay, um, it's not like this task belongs to that person, when in reality, it ain't about this chore belongs to this person and that chore belongs to that person, or that utility, that person has to cover it. It's about, okay, I want to, let's work together and get this done. We not finna split this down the middle, like, period. I don't know, that's just how I see it. Like, I don't know, that's how I see it, because it's better to keep something whole and keep it full than to split something down the middle and try to keep tabs and keep score of what is what and whose is whose. But then again, back then, you only courted for like a few days and then got married. So hey, and it's the same way in First Corinthians chapter 13 verses 5 through 6, where it says that love doesn't, it doesn't keep score. Essentially, it doesn't keep score. It doesn't say, oh, I did this and I did that and do 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 do. And someone is not selfish. Like, it's not rude, it's not self-seeking, it doesn't dishonor others, it's not easily angered, it doesn't keep any records of like wrongdoings, like it doesn't keep score. And the whole essence of like the 50-50 mentality is constantly keeping score, right? And it's also just like how Rebecca and Isaac, and how their whole family dynamic was just about split down the middle, because Isaac's favorite was Esau and Rebecca's favorite was Jacob. And it split that whole thing down the middle, to the point of where it eventually ended up with Isaac feeling betrayed. And that whole thing alone produced, the whole deception produced a grudge within Esau's heart, to the point of where he wanted to kill Jacob. And 50-50 is the same way, where you have people that are in those types of situations, and it causes people, like I said, to kind of peek over on the other side and be like, make sure you have 50, make sure you have 50, and blah blah blah, hoopla hoopla hoopla. And it's to a point of where that selfishness and that greed will cause, will cause one partner to produce a grudge within their heart, because they feel like, or they've come to the realization that the load that they have to carry, it actually isn't even 50%, right? So that's why I feel like the whole 50-50 thing isn't necessarily biblical, like in any way, shape, form, fashion, etc. And then the second thing is abuse. Abuse is not biblical of any shape, form, fashion, capacity. Example. Like one example, geez, one example that I randomly thought about, and I really had to sit and think about it for a good minute, was the whole situation between why I was finna call Abigail April. So Abigail and her ex-husband, Nabal. Cause Nabal was a rich man, but he, boy, did he love to drink and party and do all this stuff. So it was to a point of where David was, asking them, for like assistance for like, where to live and, just lounge for a little bit, right? And the ball was like, why should I do that for you? Why should I do that for you? And pretty much just like spit at David's men. And it got to a point where David was finna kill Nabal. And he was just drunk and talking disrespectful and so on, right? And it was to a point of where Abigail had to step in and repent and apologize on Nabal's behalf in order to save his life and hers. So it gets to a point of where Nabal continues to do the most. And Abigail tells Nabal what happens, and he ends up dying. And then Abigail is asked by David to be his wife, because of the fact that within that situation, Abigail did prophesy, said that he was going to be a good king. Like Abigail was in a less than ideal situation and was in like a loveless, abusive relationship, long story short. And it was to a point of where, like, hey, stuff happened. Abigail told Nabal what happened, and he ended up, he ended up falling to his death. He ended up dying. And though pretty much like the whole time, Abigail was continuing to be a good person despite, how Nabal was like treating her consistently. And it's just like I was talking about in one of my social commentaries a while back, where I was talking about why the dating pool quote unquote sucks or whatever. And I was saying that the main two reasons was like due to like selfishness and due to like unresolved heartbreak and trauma. And I was saying how abuse stems from selfishness. Cause that dude Nabal was drunk and selfish, if we're being completely and totally honest, right? And it's like God does not want us to be in abusive relationships, like in general at all. Because something I feel like a lot of people don't realize is that in those relationships, like being in like emotionally, mentally, physically, or spiritually abusive environments, let alone relationships, it drains people. It drains them a lot, to the point of where stuff like that slowly kills people from the inside out, right? So next we're going to talk about cheating and abandonment. And it's crazy because cheating and abandonment back in ancient times, or just in the Bible, are like, those two things are like grounds for divorce. Cause as a matter of fact, y'all gonna hear me doing a lot of clicking. I'm just pulling up these scriptures. I'm sorry. So In Matthew 31, it literally says that anyone who divorces their wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, right? And in First Corinthians chapter 7 verses 10 through 16, like, hey, I'm just trying to make sure, because you have some people that be saying a whole lot of nothing. I wouldn't say a whole lot of nothing. It's like they kind of say something, but it doesn't really have like a biblical backing in a sense. So it literally says verbatim that, I think in verse 15, like in the abandonment department, it says, but if the unbeliever leaves, like the unbeliever, whether it's the husband or the wife, um, if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or the sister is not bound in such circumstances. God has called us to live in peace, right? And then it continues to say, how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband, or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife, right? Because literally earlier on within that section, it literally says, like, if any brother has a wife who's not a believer and she's willing to live with him, or, or if a woman has a husband who's not a believer and he's willing to live with her, they got to be locked in and ain't no switching up, because the unbelieving spouse has been sanctified through his wife. However, the Bible does say, the significance of, at least being equally yoked, or like to align with each other. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, if God is calling you to be with a specific person, that's your person. If we're being completely and totally honest. And then in First Corinthians 7, verses 39 through 40, and it says, oh yeah, and also if that person dies as well, I believe. Because back in those times, if you are if you're a woman and your husband dies, you're not attached to that person anymore. Because it says in First Corinthians chapter 7 verses 39, it says a woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. Because back then, if y'all was locked in, y'all was locked in. Like, if y'all got a divorce, it is what it is. But once y'all locked in for the long haul. Like, they was thinking about it from a very, very, very long longevity type beat. So it says a woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. If her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. Right? And then it continues to say, in my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is, and I think that I too have the Spirit of God. Right? So it's saying verbatim, if he if he give up the ghost, she is no longer attached to him anymore. Right? That's not really divorce, but still, like, he's gone. Right? So the fourth one, actually no, before we go to the fourth one, geez, I feel like cheating is not really as tricky of a topic to talk about. Um, yeah, I don't really feel like it's as tricky as a topic to talk about. I feel like it becomes a topic that's tricky to talk about. Ooh, excuse me, because of how it's interesting, because especially over in the United States, like over here, cheating is treated as a big deal, but it's not treated as a big deal all at the same time. And based on how I see it, just in my personal opinion, I feel like cheating is just wrong in general. It's just like with the whole situation with Hosea and Gomer. Because the whole time, Jose is being disrespected constantly by his wife, getting cheated on left and right. And um, I can imagine that his heart was breaking. He was very upset having to, consistently, love someone that was consistently stepping out on him. But at the same time, me, like I said, well, I didn't even say it yet. But me personally, um, just from a personal aspect, I don't rock with cheating. I don't, you know? Like, there's been times where I've done like very questionable things in the past. Like, I was very cringy, when I was younger. But now that I'm older, it's like, nah. Like, specific things, the whole toxic behaviors and stuff, it's not cute. It's never been cute to begin with. So, when it comes to cheating, that's why, you know, my take on it is pretty much you need to have consideration and loyalty for your partner at the end of the day. Because for me, I view cheating as a form of disrespect in the sense of you don't respect that person. At the same time, like I said, if God is calling you to be with that person, He has the ability to restore any situation, but it's best not to trick yourself into being into a hurtful situation just because you want to be with that person. Meanwhile, God may not even want you to be with that person. You're kind of tricking yourself into breaking your own heart, right? So, this is the one people may get mad at me about, and yet I'm scalping myself about at the same time. So, the third one is about premarital sex and cohabitation. Like, this is the one that people constantly talk about every 15 seconds and may either make plenty of excuses, or they either make excuses for it or body slam other people about it all at the same time, right? And let's just keep it a stack. It is unbiblical, if we're being completely and totally honest, because in ancient times, are just not even just from a biblical aspect, like other cultures also practiced, you know the act of doing the do when y'all was married, because you knew that that was the person that y'all knew that y'all wanted to spend the rest of y'all's lives with each other, and it didn't make any sense to give your body to someone that didn't even care about you, let alone value you enough to commit to you, right? So some scriptures that I use, or that I pretty much noticed, was like First Corinthians chapter 7 verses, the first 7 verses. So I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. Right? So it says, now for the matters you wrote about. Because this is pertaining to like married life or whatever the case may be. So it says, now for the matters you wrote about. And all of these are, the New International Version translation. Right? So it says, now for the matters you wrote about. It is good for a man to not have sexual relations with a woman, but since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. Right? That whole thing is essentially saying that if you gonna smash somebody, smash your wife, smash your husband. You need to be, and I don't like to talk about it this way because even now I'm getting a little uncomfortable. You need to be canoodling with the person that you're married to. And if y'all are not married yet, y'all need to go ahead and get married. Because it even says that in the Mosaic Law. As a matter of fact, I believe. Yeah, hold on. Hold on just a moment. I'm finna find the verse really quick. Okay, correction. Correction. After I did some digging, it wasn't necessarily in the Mosaic Law. However, however, Paul says it a little later on in First Corinthians 7, because it literally says in First Corinthians chapter 7 verses 8, where it says, now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion, right? Like verbatim, it's saying, all right, if y'all want to do that badly, go ahead and just get married. You're better off just getting married. At the end of the day, period. So, another example would be First Corinthians chapter 6 verses 9 through 20. But I'm going to hold on. I'm going to go to First Corinthians 6 now. So, verse 9 pretty much is talking about, like, verbatim, about how wrongdoers won't inherit the kingdom of God. And it talks about many different examples and so on. But we're going to jump to verse 12. Well, verses 12 through 20. And the thing, ooh, like that whole thing is talking about how our specific bodies, our body is a temple and so on, right? And it also talks about how when it comes to marriage, or when it comes to like intercourse or whatever the case may be, because it literally says that in 16, do you not know that he who unites himself with a specific kind of lady is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh, but whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. So it says in 18 verbatim, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. And then that's the part where it says, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? Right? Now, from a general standpoint, and this is just me saying it from from a secular standpoint. So the reason why, like, to me, premarital sex, does pose to be a bit of a problem, or just a problem in general, is really the sole fact that you're giving yourself to somebody that would probably sell you for a bag of corn chips, and is not willing to like commit to you to like the fullest and highest degree, for one. And then two, a good chunk of some people will eventually attach themselves to said people. And it's even worse when it comes to cohabitation, because I remember when I was little and I used to watch like a lot of different movies where couples would live together and then they break up and then they live in the same apartment and so on. And it gets to a point where it's awkward, because whenever they want to hang out with their friends or whatever the case may be, their ex is literally their roommate, right? And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, you need to test run it and do and do and blah 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 and so on." And I'm not even finna use the example of why buy the cow, when, yeah, that whole weird little saying. I'm not even finna use that, because people are not cows. People are people. But when it comes down to it, in order for you to truly know the heart of that person, um, like from a Christian standpoint, all you literally have to do is just be around them long enough and really pay attention to their heart posture. Because you do not have to move in with that person just to figure out if you want to marry them or not. Just because society says that you have to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. So in a way, I'm scalping both me and you at the same time, because I think for the longest amount of time, um people always gave yeah, people would always give like people that didn't want to live with that person like the hardest amount of time, to the point of where they would assume like, oh my gosh, if they don't want to live with you, they're probably cheating or blah 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 or whatever the case may be. Like, no, there are benefits to, like, both parties not living together, at times. Like, you have your own space, they have their own space, right? And even back in ancient times, and I'm not even talking just biblical, I'm just saying ancient wise, like both parties stayed with their parents or had literally stayed with their parents, and they didn't leave or even budge to leave to live with that person until once they got married. And then they had their own little humble abode and chickens and goats and sheep and whatever the case may be, right? So with premarital sex, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Yeah, it's unbiblical. Period. Like, you hunching with somebody produces a child. Like, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, beat around the bush, nothing. I'm just gonna be as flat out honest as I could be. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. You know? Like, this ain't me shaming nobody. I'm just saying what it is. At the end of the day, that's just what it is. But when it comes down to it, I feel like, depending on whatever relationship you're in, especially if you're a Christian in relationships, take that time to pray to God about what to do pertaining to specific topics or issues or whatever the case may be. Because I don't know, something I notice is whenever people talk about these topics, some people will either get offended or will go as far as to be like, roar, when in reality, it's as simple as just talking to God about it. And then sometimes we may have to do things that, will be uncomfortable, you know, for both parties. But if that person loves you, they'll understand. They'll understand 100%. And then it's not gonna kill them if y'all don't, do anything or do the do. It's not gonna kill them. They'll be alright. And then greed. Greed is a huge one. Greed or selfishness. Like, that is just like I said in that one social commentary. Like, selfishness really births a lot of major issues that people have in like relationships and so on, such as like 50-50, cheating, abandonment, and so on, right? So when we back in First Corinthians chapter 6. So we're going to verses 9 through 11. So in verses 9, it literally says, like 9 and 11, it literally talks about how some of the main people that will not inherit the kingdom of God are greedy people, thieves and greedy people, nor drunkards, nor slanderers or people that gossip and talk smack about people and scammers. Like, nah, like, no, like, greedy people are not going to inherit the kingdom of God. Period. And then even in First Corinthians, and some of these I'm reusing because it still proves that point. So even in First Corinthians 13, verses 5 through 6, it literally says it is not self-seeking. It's not selfish. Love is not selfish. It's not rude. Point blank, period. And in First Timothy 5:8, hold on, I'm gonna give y'all, if you do want to look it up, like I said, I'm kind of just giving y'all time to do it because I'm also looking this up, re-looking this up as I go along, right? It says verbatim, and I'm gonna make sure I'm reading it with context because sometimes there's people that will sit and will be like, oh, well, you're cherry picking because do 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 do. When in reality, context, whether it's biblical or not, is very important. So in First Timothy 5, it's pretty much talking about widows, older people, and people that are servants, essentially. So it says verbatim in verse 8, because it went on and gave all of these, it gave all of these people specific instructions for what to do and how to treat people that are servants, that are older people, and, sadly, men and women that have lost their loved ones, their spouses essentially. So in verse 8, it says verbatim, anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially for their household has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. It's saying, get your bread up and be a provider. Because if you're not providing for your relatives or even your own household, that's a problem. That's a major problem. And then in Proverbs, it's going to be a lot of clicking, just I'm so sorry. So it literally says in Proverbs, geez, in Proverbs 10:4, I'm gonna go to the whole chapter of Proverbs 10, right? So it literally says in chapter 10 verses 4, it literally says, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Right? So being selfish, being greedy, just procrastinating and really just keeping stuff yourself, it's not gonna help you none at all. Like you're hurting yourself more than helping yourself in a lot of different ways. And then last but not least in this section, like scripture wise, we have First Thessalonians chapter 3 verses 10. And the whole section of 6 verses 15 is talking about a warning against idleness. But we're talking about 10. We're talking about 10. Right? So it says, and mind you, this is the New International Version, by the way. So it says, for even when we were with you, we gave you this rule. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. So in other words, man don't work, man don't eat. You don't work, you don't eat. Period. And when it comes to working, especially when you're like in a relationship, especially let alone like a marriage, it's not just about you. It's about you and that person. And if you can't seem to understand that, you just don't need to be in a relationship, because the full essence of love is from a place of selflessness, because it's the same way with how Jesus gave his life for us. Like point blank period. He could have chose not to do it, but he did. It's the same way in relationships, to where you got to stop being selfish and step out of yourself to care about that person, to love that person, and care about that person, and vice versa. It's not one-sided. It's mutual. So if you're greedy and you're selfish and you think that it's cute to be greedy and to be selfish in a relationship, it's not gonna help you none. It's really not gonna help you none. A lot of people sit, not a lot of people, but some people, you know, consistently talk about cheating, cheating, cheating when it comes to relationships. While cheating absolutely is like a deal breaker for a good portion of people, selfishness is an even huger cause of relationships not working out, as that person is essentially being taken advantage of. And then last but not least, I can hear some of the people yelling right now, she's a feminist. She's a So the sixth reason, not sixth reason, the sixth unbiblical thing in relationships is misogyny or misandry. But the thing with misandry is that was birthed because of misogyny. But meanwhile, all throughout the Bible, it talks about both the value of men and both the value of women, and how they're both valuable and made in the image of God. And it also talks about specific roles and stuff in relationships. Cause I'll never forget growing up, people would always talk about how the woman is the helpmeet and is supposed to do this, that, and the third. But when you sit and look up the word helpmeet, it literally just means a companion, a helpful companion. And it literally says that God made Adam and then eventually made Eve from his rib as a helpmeet or a partner or a companion for Adam. A helpmeet does not mean that the woman has to pick up and do everything. Being a helpmeet means being a helpful partner to your significant other. And it goes both ways. It literally goes both ways. Point blank, period. Because it says, and I'm going to give like many different examples, and I'm going to explain those examples as well. So we're going to start with Galatians chapter 3, verses 28, but we're going to just go to like the actual chapter, just for full blown context. Because in Galatians 3, it's literally talking about, having faith along with breaking down the works of the law. And pretty much just breaking this down from both like a natural standpoint and from a spiritual standpoint. So in this section specifically is talking about, people being, children of God and having a relationship with God. So it literally says in 28, no, I'm gonna start at 26. So it says, in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither servant nor free, or neither slave nor free, nor there is male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Right? If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. It didn't negate women out of the mix. It said everybody. It said everybody. Everybody. Point blank, period. So in Genesis 1:27, it literally says, God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created the man, male and female. Not just dudes. Women too. Now we're gonna go to Genesis 2:18 because this is the most commonly used one that I have heard yet. Every 15, I'm gonna say every 15 seconds, but I hear this one a lot. So it literally says, the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper or a companion suitable for him. Because in the New International Version, it says helper. In the King James Version, in the New King James Version, it also says a helper. In the King James Version, it says a helpmeet. But, hold up. Sorry for the click and sorry for the typing and clicking, y'all. So I'm looking up the word helpmeet, right? Or helpmate, right? Oh my gosh, they don't got no definition. Okay, it literally says one who is a companion and helper. It literally could be either person. But in this regard, because of the fact that Adam was made first, Eve was created to be his companion. And it's like the bare minimum that like you are to help your partner. Like, why would you not help your partner? That's what's not making any sense to me. Then we're going to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 11. So, this is one thing that I don't know. I feel like this is, I have a very big, I don't know. It's a big place in my heart for Ecclesiastes. I just love that book so much. Like Ecclesiastes, Psalms, and Proverbs, mwah, chef's kiss. But in context, Ecclesiastes chapter 4 is talking about oppression and the doom and gloom, that goes on in the world. But at the same time, it talks about how There's nothing new under the sun, and at the same time, as human beings or just as people, it ain't meant for us to do stuff on our own. Like it says verbatim in verse 9, because it says before that it was a dude, it was a man, he was all alone, and he was having to do all this hard work, and he was just alone, lonely. Like, dude was like, I'm wasting my life away, I can't even enjoy life for real. And it literally says after that in verse 9 that two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. And then it says in 10, if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. And then it literally says in 11, also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And then it says in 12, because I'm adding this to that. So it says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. So it's literally talking about the significance of teamwork. And it's the same way in relationships. You can't do everything on your own. It's essential for both y'all to work together as a team. You being a dude is not more valuable than her worth as a woman, and vice versa. Y'all two human beings that are valuable, right? So the next one, we're going to be talking about First Peter chapter 3 verses 1 through 7. So this whole section verbatim is talking about the significance of how husbands and wives should treat each other, because a lot of people love a lot of dudes that are kind of misogynist a little bit. They sit and use First Peter 3:1 and then go all the way to verse 6 and just cut it off. But they ignore the fact that in verse 7 it says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, right? They'll use that one, but they make sure to put that weaker partner in there. Because the thing, what that is saying is that the wives are not less than. The wives are not less than. Like back in ancient times, and even sometimes from a biological standpoint, some women are not as strong as men. At the same time, that doesn't make those women less than, like, at all. Just point blank, period. And it's like at first, I think when I first read that, I was like, what you trying to say? Are you trying to say I'm weaker? Like, no. It's like when I sat and thought about it, a vessel is essentially a body. Now, according to like biology and stuff, I ain't even gonna sit here a lie. You have a good chunk of dudes, most dudes that be the Incredible Hulk type beat, they be stronger than other women, but that doesn't mean that they're better or smarter or whatever the case may be. All that whole thing is saying verbatim is that, all right, y'all, when it comes to marriage, just listen to each other, value each other, like verbatim. You have some people that try to use First Peter chapter 3 to be like, okay, women, you gotta stop wearing the weaves and the braids and blah blah blah. When in reality, it's literally talking about how, as a woman, let your personality, let your fruit be a representation of who you are, not just vanity, not just vanity. Let the real you, let your personality do the talking. Because if your heart not right, it don't matter what accessories you put on. You just not gonna be right in general because your heart not right, and you just foul out here, right? So the next one, You got First Corinthians chapter 11, verses 11 and 12. So this is my favorite. Why I said it like that? So once again, I don't like to shy away from I do not like to shy away from the context at all whatsoever. So verses 2 through 16 is actually talking about, is really Paul telling the Corinthian church how to go about covering their head and what to do and what not to do, you know, and while they're having praise and worship and service or whatever the case may be. So in verses 11, it literally says, nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so is man. So also man is born of woman, but everything comes from God. Like verbatim, it's like that one song that I think by Hezekiah Walker, where it was like, I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. It's like that. It's like don't sit and think that because you a dude that you don't need no woman. And don't think that because you're a woman, you don't need no dude. When in reality, we all need each other. And we all came from God. We're all a part of God's body. Right? And it says in Proverbs 18:22 that he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. It doesn't say a woman that finds the dude. It says a man that finds a wife finds a good thing. Like, hey, don't have smoke with me now. I'm just telling you what it say. Why I said it like that? I sound like I said that so sassy. Oh my goodness. I said that. I sounded like an uncle that was telling somebody how to start their Tarbinator. But yeah, that's what it says like verbatim. And then in Ephesians chapter 22 verses 5, Ephesians 5 verses 22 through 25, it literally also echoes the same thing as First Peter um chapter 3. Yeah, it was chapter 3. First Peter 3 verses 1 through 7. Cuz it literally says verbatim, like it literally says, wives, submit to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church's body, of which he is the Savior. Right? It says this. People always love to use 22 through 24, but they keep ignoring 25, where it says, husbands, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. If Jesus gave his life for us, what makes you think that as a husband you're not supposed to give your all to this woman? Jesus gave his life for you to make sure you're good, to steer you down the right path, to love you, cherish you, care for you. You should do the same thing for your wife. Point blank period. Because it continues to say, in 26, I'm going to just read the whole thing. And this is literally, it literally says that this is supposed to be instructions for the household just in general. So it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. And it continues in 32. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, in 33, however, each of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. It's echoing the same thing in First Peter. Yeah, the woman gotta listen and love and respect and care for her husband, but the husband has to do the same thing as well. The bare minimum. The bare minimum. Right? So now, oh my goodness, there's so many verses in this section. I didn't even realize I'm oh my goodness, okay. Cause I was digging, boy. I was digging. So we move into Colossians chapter 3. We going all the way to 18. Same thing. Literally same thing. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in with the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. It is saying and echoing the same thing. Just like the wives gotta listen to their husbands, care for them, love them, cherish them, etc., the men are to do the same thing. Verbatim. I don't know why I feel like verbatim is my favorite word. All right. So now we go into Proverbs. We jumping all over the place. But we jumping from Old Testament to New Testament. So it literally says in Proverbs 31. Now you have some people screaming and whining and crying about I'm the prize and war. But at the end of the day, you can't sit and act like the Bible doesn't say that women are valuable, especially women that are wives, right? Because it literally says in Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 11, we're going to skip because it's talking about the wife of noble character. This is the infamous Proverbs 31 that people keep putting in songs and they don't try to search for. But it literally says, a wife of noble character who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Right? And it continues, you know, throughout that entire thing. You know, consistently talking about, you know, just how significant and how like powerful this woman is. Like she is her. She is her. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Right? It says her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. And something that I feel like a lot of people keep ignoring about all of this is that throughout all of these scriptures, it heavily signifies both the value, how valuable women are, and how valuable men are as well. And within these scriptures, these men don't disrespect or disregard the value of said woman. Right? So we gonna continue. We gonna we got three more verses to go. We got three more verses to go. Right? Nah, better yet, nah. I'm gonna skip over that one because I technically already read it. Because it's literally saying like First Corinthians chapter 3 verses 5, where it literally says, you know, the husband has to fulfill his duty, you know, as a husband, as is the wife. Like, right? So it says houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. And this is Proverbs 19 verses 14. But before that, Yeah, so before that, it literally says, a foolish child is a father's ruin, and a quarrelsome wife is like the constant dripping of a leaky roof. And throughout that whole thing, it's literally, once again, it's talking about the significance of having wisdom and not being around people that are liars and that, focus on their own gain, avoiding people that are selfish, avoiding people that only care about themselves, and so on. And then last but not least, First Timothy chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. So, why I said so like that? So we're going to First Timothy 3 once again. So this is pretty much talking about the qualifications for the overseers and the deacons within the church. But it says verbatim, we're gonna start with chapter 3. So the whole context is further understood. So it says, here is a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children, obey and listen to him, but obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of respectfulness, or just worthy of full respect. Right? And it literally it proceeds to say, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? And it's the same way. It is the same way of how, when it comes down to it, like in the Bible, it heavily talks about how the man is supposed to be the one responsible for being like the head of the household. And being the head of the household, in my lens, my perspective, you shape the vibes of the home. So if you as a man are not creating a safe environment, your wife is not going to feel safe and your kids are not going to feel safe. Point blank, period. Right? And later on in that section, it literally says verbatim that in the same way, like in verse 8, in the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested, and then, if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, the women are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. A deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household well. Right? It's saying, okay, you want to be a deacon? You got to be respectful. You got to have the fruits of the spirit, and you got to be respectful to your family. Because if you don't bring good vibes in that house, how you gonna bring good vibes in the house of God? You can't do that. That's impossible, right? So in the regard of misogyny, in the Old and New Testament, women are heavily used to relay and change the trajectory of people's lives, birthing generations, to make a huge impact in the Bible, and even becoming vessels for God as well. In healthy relationships, the man values the woman and the woman values the man. There's no competition as they serve and love each other. The role may be different, but they both are to be each other's helper or help meet. Right? So, I'm gonna give my own little 2 cents or whatever now that I've pretty much gotten everything out the way. right? So when it comes down to relationships, it's just like I said like months ago. And it's something I had to realize when I really started praying about it. Um, like love is not a feeling, because feelings can fleet at any given time. Like feelings can change at any different time. Love isn't a feeling, it's a choice, right? The same way that Jesus chose to give his life for us. It's a choice, right? Love is selfless. You cannot be in a situation where you cannot be in a healthy situation. Well, mainly, you can't be in a healthy relationship where you're the only selfless person, but your partner is selfish and is taking and taking and taking and taking from you, because those types of relationships are very draining on the selfless person, especially if that person has not established boundaries or anything. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, what I had ended up realizing after evaluating my own relationships is that relationships were never supposed to be as hard as it is in present day. You know, the whole lack of communication and selfishness and hoopla hoopla hoopla, it was never supposed to be that hard. Because at the end of the day, you have to maintain an open line of communication in order to, not even just communication, but also comprehension and consideration, in order to fully hear and understand what that person is saying, so you can move accordingly the way that you're supposed to move, right? And once I realized that, that's when I really stopped settling. Because unless God is telling you to be in a specific situation, you are settling. You're settling for less than what you deserve. And my perspective is that God is not calling us to settle for less. And the main problem is that in the society that we live in, I feel like we are we're kind of pushed into being in relationships and settling for people that we really don't like that, out of fear of being alone. And that's very dangerous, because it creates situations just like the situation with with Jacob and Leah. Because Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but he was tricked into marrying Leah, right? And the whole time that Leah was able to give birth and have children, she was naming these kids and straight up being honest about how she was feeling, and she felt unloved. Like I personally would have hated to be in Leah's shoes, because Leah was not loved. It was to a point of where Leah felt like she had to beg her husband to love her and to prioritize her. In the same way that Jacob played favorites, ooh wee, Isaac and Rebecca ended up playing favorites with their children, and then Jacob ended up playing favorites with his children and in between his wives. And that's not a nice feeling. That's not a good feeling to kind of realize that you're only with someone because either they couldn't find someone else or because they were afraid of being alone. And nobody deserves that, for being completely and totally honest. Um, so the main message I guess I'll put out there is geez, love isn't as difficult as what people make it seem. In relationships, it's not easy all the time. But when it comes to being in a healthy relationship, it's still not difficult to have specific conversations that are essential, or to, or to converse with each other and have fun with each other and so on. Because when it comes down to it, being in a relationship with somebody, it's not about the Instagram likes and the pictures and the blah blah blah. This is the reality that you're with this person either for the long haul or you getting your time wasted. And that's something you or whoever else that you're with, y'all will have to figure that out and pray to God about that. And then when it comes to the unbiblical things that I brought up, like, don't get me wrong, like, I ain't even gonna sit and be like, yeah, 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 like, right? Because you got some people that will beat you over the head about specific things, but still do it behind closed doors. That's why I said when it came to the whole cohabitation thing or whatever the case may be, I'm scalping you and me all at the same time, right? And when it comes down to it, um, I think it's just about that time to not make any more excuses when it comes to relationships and really move intentional. Because Paul was one person that was consistently and heavily talking about the significance of intentionality, of being honest and moving honest, right? And if we don't move that way in relationships, it's eventually gonna show, right? So when you get into relationships, and this is for anybody who's listening or whatever the case may be, don't compare your relationship to another person's relationship or to other relationships in the Bible, because a good chunk of some of the relationships in the Bible, huh, they had their issues just like other people in present day have issues within their relationships. They're not perfect by any means. It was never meant for us to look at them and be like, hey, I wish I had what they had. Because you don't know what fully went on in said person's household. You don't know that. So so when it comes to dating and when it comes to love, yeah, don't get me wrong, like, we'll get hurt by people and it sucks 100%, don't get me wrong. But the key way I feel like to truly understand what love is to look at Jesus as an example, because of the sole fact that he embodies the full essence of love. His love was unconditional. Sometimes our love as human beings can be conditional, but his love was unconditional. Love, when you look at him, love is selfless. It's the understanding and the realization that it's more than just you. It's you and that person and God together as one unit, knucking and bucking with anybody that try to come at y'all neck in a disrespectful way. Not in an actual physical way though. Like in a spiritual way, right? It's the understanding that I could have chosen anybody, but I chose you because of the fact that I care about you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, right? I didn't settle for you. I didn't pick you because no one else was left. I wanted you. Like, I want you, right? That's how it should be when it comes to relationships. But truth be told, that's why I say more than anything, I say pray. I say pray to God about it. Because I feel like God has a plan for every single one of us. And some of our relationships may be entirely different. Some people may end up with a rich dude that give them a cajillion dollars or whatever the case may be. And you may have another woman that's in a marriage and they're happy too, but they're happy in a little log cabin with some s'mores and pajamas watching the Beverly Hillbillies. You know what? That actually sound kind of lit. You know what? Don't mind me. But you never know. Because me and my best friend was having a conversation similar the other day. Never compare your relationship to somebody else's because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And then also what God has in store for their relationship may be different may be different than what God has in store for yours. Right? So all I'ma say is when it comes to relationships, before we even get in them, I just pray that all of us have the ability to pinpoint specific things that we truly want in our relationships, along with things that outside of the relationship that we ourselves should fix. Not for them, but for us. Because once, for me, a lot of the perspectives that I had in the past, it didn't really change like that until I got older and then I got into a relationship that was very healthy. And then it got to a point of where God was like, all right, you coming back in. I'm proud of you. Keep on trusting me. Keep on listening to me and so on. And being, you know, I was already in the process of growing and coming into my own. But just being in that healthy relationship kind of caused that process to go a lot more smoothly. Because when you're in the wrong relationship, you experience a lot of spiritual warfare. You'll experience a lot of hardship. You'll experience a lot of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual stuff. And this ain't even just like romantic relationships, this is friendships too. Friendships, familiar bonds, etc. So I say this to say that when it comes to relationships, moving with intentionality is everything. And at the same time, understand. And I tell my friends this all the time. And understand that if your partner doesn't fit the full essence of what First Corinthians 13, 4 through 7 fits, that probably ain't the person for you. And also at the same time, never settle. Never settle for less than you deserve. Never settle for less than what you deserve. Point blank, period. Because by doing that, you're not really establishing your boundaries and you're letting people cross your boundaries, and it turns you into a people pleaser. So that's all I'm gonna say. I've been talking for like a minute and 39. Like, why do I say a minute? An hour and 39 minutes. But if you like this video, go down, press the like button. Jeez. Share your thoughts down below. Like, what's your definition of love? Like, how do you view it? Like, what are things that you view differently, that you heard in the podcast, this episode? But aside from that, um, I'll see you guys in the next. I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. All right, bye, guys. Also, I'm gonna work on being more consistent because I started recording this around 5 something and it's like 7:11. But aside from that, that's it. All right, bye, guys.